All right. Now, let us try another call. And by another call, I'm going to try to bring back in Kay. So, Kay, again from Arizona, can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Ah, yes.
Hi,
Very
Kay.
good.
Hi, thanks for taking the call. How are you?
Absolutely.
We're well.
All right, good to hear.
All
Yeah,
right. So, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say,
I
let's
just
go with
wanted
your question.
to,
What kind of material do you want to talk about?
yeah, so I guess just to kind of contextualize the call here. So I would consider myself an agnostic atheist. And yeah, so I have this question here, whether uh, material naturalism is the foundation, the fundamental, we can call it substance of reality. And so the question here, or I guess the talk really is really more me just asking more than really arguing that it's not. But yeah, I have I guess a couple of reasons that make me kind of put that into question, or to question that material naturalism is the fundamental substance, or the fundamental reality. Yeah, but did you have
All
any
right.
questions about that? I guess.
I think you've set up the context all right. So I guess, yeah, let's get into why there might be something fundamentally non-material, non-physical.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not really going to even try to argue for well, like like a spiritual or something like, or something like that. It's just like I said, I wanted to explore reasons why maybe yes, material naturalism isn't the foundation of reality. But yeah, I guess we can start. I don't know if you've heard of there was this Christian philosopher, Alvin Plantinga. He had an argument
Mhm.
against naturalism. I don't know if you were familiar with that.
The evolutionary argument against naturalism, I believe it's called.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, are you familiar with that?
A bit. But for the sake of everyone in the audience and to make sure I don't strawman anything, how do you want to describe it or
Hmm.
present it?
Yeah. So, I guess one thing that we need to just clarify is that, at least the way that I understand it, Alvin Plantinga's argument is really an epistemological argument as opposed to a metaphysical argument, right?
Mhm.
So the argument is about our knowledge, or more specifically, do we have good reasons to believe that naturalism, or material naturalism, like I said, is the real, let's say, call it theory. I It's not a decisive, 100%, decisive argument. It's just an epistemological argument. It's an argument that attacks your justification for believing that material naturalism is the foundation of reality. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that. Yeah, I guess so. The argument, if I could put this in premise conclusion form, are you still? I just want to make sure. Are you following along?
At least I'm following.
Yep, go for it. We're good.
Okay, okay, okay. So yeah, proposition one is the probability that our human cognitive faculties are reliable. The probability of that, given that material naturalism and evolution by natural selection is true, right? So the probability of the former given the latter is low. So that's the first premise. So do you have any questions about that?
I have objections, but you can carry on.
Yeah, lay out the premises first,
Okay.
and then we'll discuss.
Okay. So so the next premise, this is a conditional statement. So it says that if I accept or I believe that natural or evolution by natural selection and material naturalism is true, and I accept that I accept proposition one, then I have a defeater for my belief that our human cognitive faculties are reliable. So does that make sense?
I don't
Hello?
know if we would use the word defeater in this context, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
let me try to rephrase what's going on here and just see if you think this is a reasonable approximation of your argument. If naturalism
Okay.
were true, we would not expect our senses and reasoning ability to be reliable. Our senses and reasoning are
Mm-hmm.
reliable, therefore, naturalism is unlikely to be true. Is that a reasonable approximation of the argument?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay. So here is where I would point out that one man's molus tollens is another person's modus tollens. I could run the argument backwards
Yeah.
and show that, hey, if there is something out there that's supposed to make our senses and reasoning reliable, then it runs into the problem. We have all sorts of examples of our senses and reasoning being unreliable. We have optical and auditory illusions. We have all sorts of reasoning mistakes, all sorts of really weird quirks that seem to be quirks of the nature in part of the brain and the way the brain is structured, which itself is a relic of our evolutionary history. And that is not expected
Mm-hmm.
on supernaturalism, but pretty much required on naturalism. So I would run the argument backwards and basically say, hey, if this thing was created or put together by something that doesn't require naturalism, that can go beyond the natural, then why does it seem to have all the foibles
Mm-hmm.
you'd expect from a kludgy process like evolution that makes things work good enough, but not necessarily perfect?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I guess if I could just add a little bit more context. So I guess the let's say the ontological or the metaphysical landscape or map that that I see is well. So I see this. Yeah. Okay. So I, I imagine this as a, like a diamond. Let's say at the top verdicts. We can put substance dualism there. On the left corner of this diamond shape, we can put material naturalism. On the right side, we could put, let's say, idealism, and on the bottom, we could put, let's say, neutral substance monism. So I think that I would agree with that, that you would run into some troubles if you, yeah, if I want to, or let me phrase it like this, I would run into trouble if I were to invoke or try to use this as some kind of argument for, let's say, dualism, right? Where there, I'm going to put this in air quotes, there is this supposed non-physical, non-materialistic, or immaterial world or substance, right? The spiritual world, right? And so actually, I don't, I hear Christians give this argument, right? But I don't think Christians realize that this is actually an argument against them, because with substance dualism, they also affirm that the material world is in some way real, in some way, fundamental. It's just fundamental in this part of, I guess, the metaphysical world, right? So yeah, I would agree with you that if I were to invoke some supernatural substance, some supernatural world, like one would do uh, in a substance dualism framework like Christianity, yeah, I think that would run into a problem. But I think what I think the original argument here is attack on material naturalism. I think it's the the point still holds. Does that make sense?
So I think it still has all the problems about just even my quick formulation issue of running the logic backwards. Because I understand that, yeah, Platinga is basically trying to say there is a tension between believing in naturalism and believing in evolution, because evolution won't give you a brain that will be reliable, and you're using that brain to come up with all the science you're doing. Problem is, first off, that if this is supposed to then be somehow a different prediction than supernaturalism, as Planinga does, then he still got the exact same sort of problem that I just mentioned. We would then expect brains and senses that would be more reliable than what they currently are. In fact, one might even wonder why they aren't perfectly reliable. Why is it that we have all sorts of optical illusions, that I look at a power outlet and see faces, or I see dragons in the clouds, or I think I hear my mother calling me when there was nothing going on. All those weird little things, let alone all the other visual, auditory, sensing illusions that we have, and to some degree that we actually exploit for movie magic. Paul can, of course, talk much more about that, but the fact of the matter is, when you're watching a video, you are not watching reality. You're watching, at least in the olden days, 24 stationary images just being traded out very fast enough that our brain just kind of blends it all together. Why would we expect that on basically a supernatural sort of thing going on there? But it's also worth noting this. I think also Plantinga doesn't really know what evolution is, because evolution doesn't work on individual beliefs. And the fact of the matter is, if you had the really weird ideas that, hey, that there's just this giant collection of beliefs that evolution acts on, rather than we have these sense organs that need to make at least good enough understanding of the world to make sure we don't fall off a cliff, fall into the mouth of a tiger, or into a volcano, or any other, stupid situation where we don't survive and have kids. That's the sort of thing that evolution actually does do, and it makes brains just good enough to ultimately pass those sorts of things. And it's only been on top of that hardware that we've started installing the software of mathematics, of scientific thinking. And even there, kind of hit and miss how well of a job we do. Believe me, we are not exactly very good at talking about infinity, because we ended up having these brains that weren't well designed to handle that concept. And we're still dealing with weird, counterintuitive notions because of that. So, like I say, I would just throw it back to Plantinga and say, one, I don't think you know what evolution is, and two, yeah, give a thumbs up to that, and two, uh, the hypothesis that is being put forward under supernaturalism would give us reasoning and sense reliability that should be different than what we actually do see. So I don't even find it not convincing. I think it's actually evidence against theism and supernaturalism then.
I don't think Plantinga is adequately understanding that a brain that is right 50% of the time is going to have a survival advantage over a brain that is right 25% of the time, right? And so you work your way slowly, and a brain doesn't have to, again, it doesn't have to be 100% correct to have a survival advantage. And that just seems to be, as Aaron pointed out, the huge flaw. I think that's the biggest flaw of all, is just that failure to understand that the imperfect eye is better than no eye at all in terms of evolutionary, development.
Yeah. Well, even more importantly,
So,
the foibles that our brains have are a product of our evolution. So, for example, the fact that we grew up as a social species, we are so attuned to trying to get any sort of social information from our common tribe members, we're really obsessed with faces and all sorts of subtleties of faces. So our brain is hyperactive in looking for faces anywhere and everywhere and interpreting those faces, even when they're not there. We look at the clouds, we see a smiling face. I look at this spark plug, or not spark plug, this outlet in my house. It looks like it's giving me the O face. Why is it making that face at me? Did I do something wrong? It's going, oh, no, that's what our brains do. It sees things that aren't there, in part because of our strange evolutionary history. And that's exactly what you expect then on evolution, that we have architecture in our brains that is biased towards certain things, but it's definitely not going to be so unreliable that we can't successfully navigate the world. Because to be able to navigate the world with any high level enough of reliability to have species go around for tens of thousands of years, it can't be just a whole bunch of dumb luck. It has to have enough reasoning power to do it well enough to survive like that, and to have something that can just be completely imaginary is absurdly improbable.
Platinga also fails to recognize that most of the scientific endeavor is rules put in place to overcome our brain's faults and limitations and biases. Like, we wouldn't need to have the idea that we can try and repeat results if we perfectly got it right every time, or if we perfectly observed everything every time. Like, so much of scientific infrastructure is around overcoming human limitations, and that's how we've achieved things, by crowdsourcing the project, as it were, because individually we're terrible. So
Mhm.
I've never found this a compelling argument, frankly, from Platinga. And I apologize for my dog. I don't know if you guys can hear the thunderstorm that's happening here, but we're getting crazy thunder, and my puppy is very afraid of thunder. So apologies for that distraction.
Um, so, Paul, I know you're Canadian. You have to apologize for everything, but on this show, there's two things we never apologize for: our opinions and our puppies.
Anyhow, Kate, does any of that make sense?
Okay, I'm afraid your phone might have gone mute. You might need to tap it to wake it up.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can now. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I guess I'm not. I think I'm not understanding, because I agree with everything you said, and I suspect that Plantinga would also agree with what you said, right? Um, that our brains are really infallible to
Oh no, the problem is they're not infallible. They're quite
perceiving.
fallible. That's the thing that Plantinga doesn't really address well. The fact that our brains, our reasoning is filled with foibles and fallacies and problems and shortcuts and kludges that are not expected on
Mhm,
perfectly reliable hardware. This is like, at best, my brain is Windows 3.1 at best.
mhm. Yeah, well, I think that's the, I guess, the little seed of doubt, or skepticism that kind of corrupts the whole thing, right? Is that, yeah, we're not we're not very good at perceiving reality, and so maybe that kind of trickles down or muddies your all of your um, cognitive faculties, and hence, now you can doubt this this belief of evolution and naturalism.
But again, the issue though is that our brains are not like so unreliable that it's 50-50 about anything they believe. It's that, hey, it makes mistakes, but that never means therefore you have reason to believe everything you believe is wrong. If there's a 1% chance that one of my beliefs is wrong, that would mean like roughly 1 in 100 of my beliefs are wrong. That doesn't mean everything is under doubt and I can't believe anything. That would actually be not just hyperskepticism, but that would be mathematically incoherent. If I have a 99% chance of winning the lottery, I can't go and assume I've lost. It's like, no, that is against the probability.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of why I premised this whole thing, that this is an epistemological argument, right? It's not a it's attacking your justification for believing, right? It's not, this isn't a solid punch, a solid defeater of this belief of evolution and material naturalism. It's really
Well,
just
my argument
attacking
isn't
the
that's not just a
your
I'm saying it's
reasons.
not just not a strong argument. I don't even think it's a wet squib. I don't think it has any power at all as an argument to make me even change the probability in favor of the supernatural a small amount. In fact, if anything, as I would argue, it's evidence against because everything that is weird about our reasoning actually makes sense in the light of
Mhm.
evolution. And that is not what you would expect if somehow there's anything that makes our brains more reliable than what an evolutionary process would do.
Well, I guess let me say something. I do kind of depart from, well, I don't like I said earlier, I really doubt Christianity. But in another way that I think I kind of depart from Plantinga is that I I think that if this is right, if he's right, then I think that maybe material naturalism and evolution are are true, or I mean, these are true theories, but they're also not true. And just I'm gonna try to explain that. So you know, I'm a complete ignorant when it comes to physics. I think more than I know that you know more than I do. But so correct me if I'm misunderstanding or misconstruing things here. But um, Newtonian mechanics, right, works pretty darn good here on Earth. It doesn't work really good if we try to use it. If we try to get a rocket to, let's say, another solar system. But Einstein's theory of general relativity is also makes predictions, the same predictions as, let's say, Newton, maybe slightly more accurate here on Earth, but also makes these predictions at or let me say like this can also get the spaceship to another solar system, or maybe even beyond that. Um, so I guess just to use an analogy, like if we think of reality as a table and our theories as these mantles that are covering the table, right? I think maybe let's say Isaac Newton's theory or Newtonian mechanics is like it's this mantle. This is just for the sake of the example. Let's say Newtonian mechanics covers a fourth of the table, a fourth of, let's say, reality. And Einstein's theory covers, let's say, half of the table, right? Or maybe the whole table. But the point being is that Newtonian mechanics is true here locally, but it may not be true in other contexts or places in the universe. And I think that similarly, maybe material naturalism and evolution are true in a sense, but they may not be the fundamental reality. Hence the question. And
Okay.
I think that might avoid the I guess the counter argument, right? The supernaturalism, right? Which I said I don't believe in supernaturalism either.
Okay, you
Yeah.
lost me entirely. You lost me entirely. So
May I? I think I can
yeah, please,
I think I
please.
can try to translate. So the idea that yeah, we use Newtonian physics, Newtonian gravity really well for a lot of stuff, but it's not the ultimate theory. So we might say that Newtonian physics is instrumentally true. It is useful, but not fundamentally true, because Einstein's theory of general relativity does even better at saying what true reality is. But even that, we might say, is actually still instrumental. We can't really know for sure. So I think what Kay is getting at is materialism might be instrumentally true, that it does a lot of heavy lifting for us, but it doesn't actually tell us about the ultimate reality, that it just might be
Oh,
really good for calculating, but it may not be the ultimate reality. Kate, do you think
S-
I'm representing you
so
well?
Yeah, and I would also add evolution. There's with naturalism as well. Yeah.
Well, that's where I think you
And,
shouldn't.
and
I
I think
think you
this should be,
shouldn't mix those two things probably,
yeah.
because well, go ahead. I'll let you finish your thought.
Mhm.
Let's just leave evolution out of it for now. Let's just talk about supernaturalism and naturalism as one topic at a time if we can.
Yeah, so I would, just to clarify, I would say material naturalism, because I think
Right.
that you can conceptualize naturalism in these other ontologies, right? Like idealism, or even neutral substance monism as well. But yeah, go ahead.
So there are two things. There's methodological naturalism, which is what historians and scientists typically agree to, where they're going to say, like, you know what, for the sake of advancing our fields, we're going to just not worry about whether there might be something supernatural because it doesn't necessarily help make predictions or whatever, right? So that's methodological naturalism, which is the pragmatic version. Then there's, of course, philosophical naturalism, which is more of a hard stance saying not only is materialism the only useful part, a philosophical naturalist is going to be more hard stance and say, nah, there isn't even supernatural. Is that the kind of delineation you're attempting to make here?
Okay, we can't hear you. Just make sure your phone isn't asleep again.
Yeah, sorry about that.
We hear you now.
Yeah, I guess let me try to explain what I understand by naturalism. So if we take whatever reality or the nature of reality is, by naturalism, I understand that every phenomenon can be explained by whatever the nature of reality is. It's a closed system, right? And so something like supernatural means that I'm having to explain something in the system. I'm having to appeal to something outside of the system to explain something in the system, right?
Sure.
And I think this kind of conceptual, this structure can be, I don't think that it's exclusive to materialism. I mean, it doesn't work with, again, with the dualism and
Okay, so
all of that.
I think
Right,
though,
so
by saying like there's an
yeah,
outside
I
sort of thing out there, I think this actually does though kind of get to the heart of where I would say the big objection to where you're going with all this is. Here's the thing:
yeah, because
naturalism,
I'm sorry, can you
materialism
repeat
has
that again?
been. Yeah, I was going to say here is where I'm going to push back and say, hey, here's the thing: materialism hasn't just been very successful. It's that we haven't found anything that falls outside of what materialism can explain. Well, conversely, there have been all sorts of supernaturalistic claims for millennia, and every time that we're able to check them out, they fall apart. And we can either show that somebody was duped in some sort of way, or there's some other materialistic explanation for what's going on. That has
Mm.
basically been the entire history
Yeah,
of
I'm
science.
sorry.
So,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Can I just clarify something? I'm not trying to argue for a supernatural understanding. But yeah, I think I think I've mentioned this, and I apologize if I'm not clear. Yeah, so like I would reject supernaturalism in any of these four ontologies. Dualism, materialism, idealism, or even if there is this supernatural realm, then it can't be one of those. It can't be one of the monisms, right? It can't be materialism. It can't be idealism, or it can't be neutral substance monism. It has to be dualism, like Christians believe, right? And I reject that. We can. I'm sure you can come up with some counter arguments to dualism. I can do that too. I just don't think it's even worth our time. But so as I see it, this leaves 4 options or 5 options which would be idealism, or some form of idealism, or a substance monism, a neutral substance monism. And in those ontologies, that doesn't obligate me to believe in supernaturalism. So just to
Okay,
clarify,
on these
I'm not.
on idealism or these other ontologies, and you're excluding dualism. So on these other ontologies, does it make any
Mhm.
observable difference from what you would expect on materialism? Does it make any sort of predictions different than what a materialist prediction would have, or is everything identical?
I think it has. I think it has to. It has to. It has to be like this. Not, like let me just go back to that Newtonian and Einstein, theories, right?
We don't have to go back to that. This is just a
With
question.
these other,
Is it that are you going to see the exact sort of things on materialism as you are on these non-materialist ontologies? Will there be any observable difference?
um, well, yes and no, right? So these
It has
ontologies
to be only
have
one
to
or the
make the
other.
same predictions. Oh, well, not quite, right? So, like, this is why I'm referring back to the Newtonian mechanics and Einstein example, right?
And if we go back to that
So
example, they
Einstein
do make
had
different
to.
predictions. Go out and see things that are impossible on Newtonian mechanics. So on the same sort of thing, if you're saying there's a
I'm
different
sorry.
ontology, either it has to make identical predictions or it has to make different predictions. And I'm trying to get at what you think it actually is, because it can only be one or the other. It's either identical in what you will see, or there will be some observable difference. Which of the two is it?
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to push back on that, right? So um, Newtonian
This is binary. It's one or
Einstein
the
theory
other.
makes the
No.
same. It's not, right, because Einstein's theory makes the same local predictions as Newtonian mechanics, but yet they differ at
Yes.
in
So
other
the answer.
places,
So
So
right?
they
the
make
answer
different
is they
So
differ.
predictions.
so yes and
Yeah.
no.
No, it's
No, the
not
answer
yes
is
and no.
yes.
I'm sorry.
The answer is yes, they do differ. If you can find any observable difference, then they're different.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. In just in that understanding. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So on these other non-materialist ontologies, would there be any observable difference?
Um. Yes. Yes.
Okay, what differences should we go out and look for? Because now it's a scientific question. If there are differences that we can go and see, then we can go and look for them. What should we look for?
Hmm. Yeah. I'm not sure. let me. Okay. So this might kind of be an answer. And just to remind you, I'm a neophyte when it comes to physics. But are you familiar with Quantum Magazine?
I know it.
So there's they also have a YouTube channel, and a couple of maybe months ago or weeks ago, they posted a video about Einstein's theory, and I'm going to I'm going to butcher it, so I might need your help here, but I'm going to try to explain what I understood from the video, which is that so it seems like um, Einstein's theory breaks down on, or when physicists try to observe, I guess, particles
Yeah.
at
Okay.
some
Let's
threshold,
grant that.
which
Okay.
I think is,
We've been through this already. So we get that there's different models of physics that work better in different realms. Absolutely. Get that. Totally get it. Where's the what are we're trying to get
mhm.
to? Where, so therefore what when it comes to dualism or idealism or whatever? Like we understand. So are you just hypothesizing that maybe someday we will discover some corner that needs a supernatural realm? And we just haven't got there.
No,
We just haven't found it
I
yet.
think no. I think I've repeated this already multiple times. I reject supernaturalism.
Well, but then I don't understand where we're going, because you keep coming up with these realms, and we understand that in physics, different models work better at different scales and in different scenarios. Cool. But therefore, what when it comes to naturalism and supernaturalism?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and well, again, I just want to clarify that I'm talking about material naturalism.
Okay,
so,
but therefore what?
Well, I guess let's just step back a little bit, and this whole talk, right? It's about, at least on my end, I'm trying to explore whether this idea might even be possible. The idea that material naturalism may not be the foundation of reality, the
Well,
actual
possible is
reality.
one thing, but is there anything that should make us think it's even plausible, let alone probable? Obviously, we can talk about it's
Yeah,
possible that our ontology is wrong. I'll grant that, sure. But if you don't have any reason to think that, then it's mental masturbation at this point.
yeah. I, I just feel like we were kind of losing the scope of the talk. But yeah, so in
No,
the
if your whole
so
point calling in was saying maybe naturalism isn't right, then I think we would
mhm,
have agreed on in the first 10 seconds that maybe it's not.
mhm.
So is that essentially
Okay,
what you're
but
getting at?
yes, but I'm not just arbitrarily saying yeah maybe. We talked about Plantinga's argument, and I was in the middle of talking about this other thing.
But I guess you have to help
Be-
me out with the point. I don't. I mean, the point of the show isn't like let's call and chit chat about possible things that might be because we think they're cool. Sort of the point of the show is we're examining what we believe and
mhm,
why. And so you've
yeah.
now mentioned several times you reject supernaturalism, and yet you seem to be, from my perspective,
Mhm.
arguing that maybe supernaturalism shouldn't be rejected.
I think you're conflating material naturalism with just naturalism. So
Fine.
if I believe in,
So
let's say,
I'm just
yeah,
you still seem to be treating this like you're calling up some buddies to say, isn't this a neat possibility that maybe is a thing, as
Yeah,
opposed
Kay, I
to
think we need to get to the point. Is
mhm.
there anything out there that you can point to and says,
Okay,
this is not possible on materialism, or at least unlikely on materialism? Because if you don't have anything like that, then we're just talking speculation and just hiding from
yeah,
the
yeah.
fact that, hey, this materialism thing is working out pretty darn well. What do you see as something that materialism
Mhm.
fails to explain?
Well, I guess a problem that uh, that I see is that there's kind of this kind of quantity quality gap. So if with material naturalism, if everything can be defined by a list of numbers, and I don't understand how we can derive qualities such as experiences, qualia.
Quality isn't quite the same thing as qualities, especially if you're comparing that to quantities. But I think we're getting to the point. Basically, how do you get
Yeah.
mental experience from materialism? And I'll just give the really short answer. Brains do weird shit that makes us go, ooh, wow. That's obviously not the very scientific take on it, but just
Mm-hmm.
the really quick and dirty. The quality we get is the peculiarities of our brains. There's nothing there that strikes me as somehow incompatible with materialism. We just don't know exactly how the brain arrives the particulars of my experiences. But to say that that means all of physics is a failure or somehow missing something important just because I can't describe necessarily how I got my experience of redness when looking at an apple, I think is solipsism pretending to be philosophy.
You might be muted again, Kay.
Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, I think it feels like we're confusing the map. These equations, these numbers, I think they're meant to represent something. I think insisting that our experiences and reality, whatever reality is those equations and those numbers. I think that might be confusing the map for the actual territory.
Do you think that's what either of us are doing?
Mhm.
Do you think that's what either of us are doing?
I think so.
You think we're
Yeah,
confusing?
I think so.
You think we're confusing the physics for the reality?
Well, when it comes to maybe not performatively, I don't think so, but maybe intellectually.
All we're doing intellectually is saying we will entertain non-materialistic suggestions at which such time is that they're better explanations, or which time we have something that isn't explainable materially. And and I know you have some kind of arbitrary, you want to talk about material naturalism, which is a subset just of general naturalism or physicalism. All we're trying to do is demonstrate that there is something needed outside the materialism, and then we'll talk about it. And it doesn't seem like you actually have a thing. You have analogies, you have comparisons, you have different things that you don't feel are adequately explained yet, even though you're not denying that they could be explained. It just seems like right now we're treading water.
And it's worth noting, Kay, that when it comes
Yeah,
to map
could
territory
I?
analogy here, that you're going to have the same problem, because if we're saying, well, we're using the map of materialism, you're saying we should be using a different map, because when you're talking about idealism or any other sort of non-material ontology, that's a different map. The question is, why do we think we should even go to the shop and buy that map? Is there any feature that map has that the naturalism or materialism map doesn't have? Is there a reason why we would go and spend an extra $10 for that map rather than stick with the one we've gotten, that not only has it done a good job, but every time previously people have relied on the non-materialistic map, they've gone off a cliff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Could I agree with what you said. Can I ask you something? So, like, how would you define, I guess, material? Or yeah.
I would say the fundamental stuff that's non-conscious, and then that means consciousness ultimately is derived from non-conscious stuff bumping together. If something fundamentally was conscious that you couldn't break it down into something non-conscious, that's where I think we then break away from materialism. That's my best way of creating a ontological divide. But I do think if we're going to now get into a whole bunch of other definitions and stuff, I think we may want to pause that conversation to move on to other callers.
Okay. Well, if I could just say the last thing, or this last thing, if I understood you correctly, I think you gave like a negative definition, and I think we could also maybe give a positive definition, and maybe say that materialism, or something that is materialistic or material, something that has a dimension, has it's 3D.
It's just going to then fall into other definitions on top of definitions. It's not going to get us anywhere. So like I say, I think we probably just want to end the call for tonight. And like I say, the best we're going to do if we're going to make progress on if materialism is false is find something that shows it's false, rather than can we come up with a definition that makes things difficult, rather than, hey, let's actually go and do an experiment to see if we're wrong. Because believe me, people have been, to use some rude language, wanking about this for thousands of years that have made no progress. Science has come in and said, hey, if we use methodological naturalistic approaches, we get a shit ton done. And all the other ontologies can't show they've had the same sort of progress. Instead, they've just sat on the sidelines and said, science will never do this, or we already knew that, or our results are consistent with that anyways. I've seen thousands of years of excuses while science actually gets things done. So I kind of want to leave it at there, but Kay, I don't want to say let's never talk again. Please call in at another time, but I do want to get other callers in tonight. All right? Oh, crud. I think you might be muted again at the very
Hello?
last moment. Oh, here you are. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I appreciate your time and thanks for taking the call. Take care.
Thanks, Kay.
All right. Have a good night. All right. Has your ontology been shaken tonight, Paul?
It has not. No. I'm still open to the supernatural realm as soon as someone can make that make sense. But until
Well,
then,
there were a couple times I saw you going back and forth between 3 and 2 dimensions, so your foundations might have been getting a little bit shaken.
oh, I see. You guys get that's true. Yeah, fundamentally, yeah. Anyway, the thunder
All
has
right.
stopped, so my dog has calmed down, and that's all good news too.
Very good. Very good.